let's go ahead and intro this idea of ecology, our final unit here in our lovely biology curriculum. Um, and again, you should have your slide decks open while we're going through this. All right, so ecology is the study of interactions between organisms, between each other, and with their environment. So far this school year, we have talked about what it is that makes a living thing, right? Like we talked about the macromolecules. We talked about the 8 characteristics of all living things. So we defined what a living thing was, like what characteristics it had to have. We then moved into some cell stuff. We talked about cells. We talked about, and again, because cells is one of the requirements for living things. From cells, we moved into this idea of genetics. We talked about Mendel and Punnett squares and traits. From there, we traveled into DNA and RNA, right? So we talked about how these traits actually come to being. And then most recently, we talked about protein synthesis, this idea that we can actually build these proteins, and these proteins are then responsible for building organisms. So now we're going to start looking at these actual organisms and how they interact with each other, because we kind of know how cells interact with each other. We know how molecules interact with each other. We know how DNA and RNA interact with each other. So now if DNA and RNA are building these big organisms, all of these living things, we're now going to look at how they interact with each other. So there was a German biologist. His name was Ernest Haeckel. Haeckel, I'm not sure how that's pronounced. Ernest H. There we go. We'll just, fast forward that past his name. And he actually was the guy who coined the term ecology. And his view of nature was that nature is its own system. The way that we might look at an economic system here, in terms of, like, we talk about the stock market, we talk about banks, we talk about a budget inside our homes, things like that. He basically saw nature as having its own economy, as having its own budget, if you will, where things come in, things go out, and things interact. And if you take too much of one, then it depletes others. So that's kind of exactly how a household budget works. The prefix eco is stemmed from the Greek of oikos, meaning house. So when we talk about ecosystem, we're talking about the system of the house, right? The house, of course, being planet Earth. But again, each ecosystem can be looked at individually, and we'll talk more about that when we talk about organization of the ecosystem. Our largest house, our largest system that we look at is the biosphere. Bio, life, sphere, circle. This circle of life, a la, Lion King. But the biosphere literally refers to all living components in all of Earth's systems. In other words, it is the section of the thin layer of life that exists all the way around the Earth. So this is everything from the deepest part of the oceans that's alive to the tallest mountain that's still alive. Everything in that little tiny layer, if it's alive, it is part of our biosphere. Issues or questions on the first slide? Maybe I should open my chat. Okay, hearing none, we move on. So this brings us to the term that we opened with today, okay? This idea of interdependence. Everything, every single organism in the environment and the environment are interdependent. Every organism relies on other organisms and its physical environment in order to survive. Right now, what is hopefully, unless you're a zombie or a vampire, please don't be, because that'd be really scary. Right now, every single one of us is doing something. What are we doing? We are
Breathing in and breathing out.
breathing in, breathing out. Right now, we are interacting with our environment. What would happen to us if we weren't breathing? Like literally.
We would die.
We would die and we would no longer be a living organism. We'd be a dead organism. In order to live, we must interact with our environment. We must interact with each other. So you depend on other organisms to live. How many of us had breakfast this morning? Anybody? And tell me what you had for breakfast. Anybody? Just unmute. Tell me what you had. I see people talking, but I'm not hearing. So you forgot to unmute, or you could drop it in the chat. That's fine too. Just anybody. Tell me what you had for breakfast. Please tell me what you had for breakfast. Blueberry muffin, eggs, toast, and bacon. Oh, I'm coming to your house. That's delicious. Sorry.
I had pancake, sausage, and eggs.
Pancake, sausage, and egg. I'm coming to your house too. Lord have mercy. I'm gonna start like visiting your
I
house.
had waffle, bacon, eggs, and
Waffle.
grits
Your mom
this
is like
morning.
throw down first thing in the morning. I'm just saying. All right, cool. So I want to point something out. Blueberry muffins, which was the first one that came up. A blueberry is obviously a fruit that comes from a living thing, which is a plant. The muffin part is made from wheat or flour, which comes from wheat, which is another plant. Okay, so the person with the blueberry muffin, they interacted with some organisms this morning. Blueberry plants, wheat plants. Anybody who had eggs, I heard a lot of eggs, obviously, that you are interacting with, I'm guessing, chicken eggs. So you are interacting with chickens. I mean, I don't know, maybe you had duck eggs, which would be a strange choice for breakfast, but hey, some people eat them. People who said something about how they had toast. Again, that's right up there with interacting with wheat. That's another plant. You're interacting. Why do we eat breakfast, anyways? I mean, besides the fact that it's clearly delicious.
For energy purposes.
Energy purposes. What's the other thing that we eat food for? We need the energy, but we also need the starts with the letter N.
Nutrients.
Nutrients.
Nutrients. We need the nutrition. Right. Exactly. So again, the eggs, we're interacting with a chicken. I mean, really, technically, we're interacting with, but it doesn't matter. The eggs from a chicken. If you had bacon, if you had sausage, unless of course, I mean, traditional bacon, traditional sausage is a pork product. So that's interacting with a pig. Now, maybe you had turkey bacon, maybe you had, sausage that was, I don't know, like chicken sausage, like because they do make these things, and that's fine. But traditional bacon, traditional sausage is a pork product, which of course pork comes from pigs. That is our interaction with it. I'm guessing most of you either had milk, maybe a glass of water, maybe a glass of juice. And if you drank anything this morning, I mean, like me, like the coffee addict, what do you need to make coffee besides the coffee grounds? You pour it.
Oh, you need that.
Starts with a W.
Water.
Water,
Water.
yeah. Every single one of us needs. When water is not even a living organism, it's kind of like when we breathe. But we're still. But without water, what happens to us?
We die.
We die. Yeah. So the answer to everything is without X. If we're talking about ecology and evolution and interdependence, without it, if you're not sure, just go with we die, because that's going to be like 75% of the top of the answers of what happens when you take out this thing. All right. So yeah. All right, we rely on each other. I mean, so thank you to those chickens and pork and the piggies and the blueberries and the wheat. Thank you to all those things. We are grateful that they exist in the universe because they make for a delicious breakfast first thing in the morning on a Monday when we don't want to wake up anyways. All right. So again, if we're looking at the slide, we have a snail. He relies on the plants to eat. The plants and algae would not grow without the bacteria that help to recycle nutrients. Again, everything is interacting. I need to make this go forward. Interdependence between organisms gets really complicated really fast. I'm not going to minimize that at all. Like, if you consider the fact that all of the nutrition that you, like, even us as a human, right? We need water, we need nutrients, we need minerals, we need air. There's all these physical, non-living things that we need, that we depend on from our environment. But then there's like these other living organisms that we depend on, and then they depend on their physical surroundings. So, like I said, it can get very, very complicated very, very fast. Because everything is dependent on something else. The idea that anybody can be independent to a biologist is laughable, because there is no such a thing. There is no independence truly, because every single one of us depend on somebody or something else, because we don't exist in a vacuum. Issues or questions? All right. So the first thing that we look at when we talk about interdependence, we have to look at levels of organization. How is my environment organized? So the study of ecology always starts with the study of an individual or a single living organism, and it can go all the way up to the biosphere. Okay, so this is in order: individual, population, community, ecosystem, biosphere. I don't remember. Okay, cool. Yes, I do talk about them individually in each the succeeding slides. So we don't need to talk completely about them right now. But as you can see, as we go up, things become more complicated. So looking at the image, what is an organism? Unmute or put it in the chat. If you had to just guess from looking at this image right here, what do you think an organism is? Anybody? Otherwise, you're going to make me sing. Nobody wants that. What is an organism? Don't look it up. Just look at the picture. A living individual. There we go. So let's take a look at population. Looking at the picture, what do you think a population is? Anybody? 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 The size of it. What are we seeing? So we have a single living organism, single individual. What do I have here in a population? Yeah, thank you. I have a couple people who answered in the chat. I appreciate you. So it's just a group of organisms. Are those organisms different, or are they the same in a population?
The same.
Yeah, they're all the same. Like, I have this single little pine tree, but now I have a population of those same little pine trees. Awesome. All right, so now after I have a population, I have a community. What does a community look like? It's a grouping of what? Yep, thank you in the chat. I appreciate you. Yeah, so a community is a group, they said, of living things. We're going to go with that. That's a good enough definition for now. And then we have ecosystems, biomes, and biospheres. Those get a little complicated. We'll get back to those, okay? We don't need to talk about that right now. But right now, just look at these simple diagrams. We can get a beginner's understanding of what an organism, a population, and a community is just by looking at the pictures. Issues or questions? Fair enough. All right, so we have the individual. An individual, an organism, let me back up. An organism, again, is a single individual, a single living thing that is a specific species. Like, I am an individual, I am an organism, I am a single human, as are you, right? All right, so then we get into this idea of species and population. A species is a group of individuals that are similar to each other and they can breed and create fertile offspring. So, human beings are a species, right? So, it doesn't matter if you're from the United States, it doesn't matter if you were from Mexico, it wouldn't matter if you were from China or India or Uganda. It wouldn't matter what country you were from. If you are a human being and you met and fell in love with and chose to have children with another human being, you would create fertile offspring. What that means is your children themselves would be able to have children. If a house cat, my house cat, my little house cat Mango decided to hang out with and make a little kitty cat family with the neighbor's cat, he's a cat, she's a cat. They would make little baby kittens together, and those kittens would one day be able to have kittens of their own. So, can somebody tell me why tigers and lions, why are they not the same species? Because you can make ligers. Does anybody know why tigers and lions are not? You can make ligers. It's a mix between a tiger and a lion. Does anybody know why a liger is not actually a species?
Because it's a made up. Because it's a made up
No,
thing.
it's not made up. You literally can make a liger. Google it.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's Etsy thing.
okay. I'm gonna check that out today for sure.
It's a thing. I'm not kidding. So if a lion, which is one species, and a tiger, which is another species, get together and they're like, "Hey, how you doing?" And they decide to breed, and they will make a offspring called a liger. But that liger is infertile. If you try to breed two species, they're again going back to the DNA. No matter how similar the DNA might be, unless that is fertile offspring, it's not its own species. More commonly, here in the United States, especially with the westward expansion during the 1800s, shortly after the Civil War, as people were pushing west. We don't need to get into like the whole history of that, but one of the things that we saw a lot of use of was mules. If you don't know, a mule is a cross between a horse and a donkey. So a donkey is one species, a horse is another species. Donkeys are really they're strong, they're very very hardy, but they're extremely stubborn. Like they will like literally be like, nope, not doing it. Horses, they're large, they can they're very amenable, like they have a great attitude normally, like, as long as they like you, they'll do whatever you want them to do even if it hurts them. But they tend to be a little fragile in the health department. If you know anything about horses, horses are like you have to wipe them down. You can't, like, you have to take care of their hooves. There's lots of things that you have to do with horses. So what the westward expansion people did, because they wanted something that was strong and hardy like a donkey, but they wanted something that was nicer, like a horse, I guess. They bred horses and donkeys and made mules. But mules are not a species because mules are born infertile. Mules cannot get together with other mules and have little mule babies. So they are a hybrid, which is infertile. So again, species, the key thing with a species is that they have to be a
But
group of.
Miss Cano,
Yes.
I'm sure you explained this earlier, probably a while ago, but why can't those hybrids, you know, have
Oh, because their DNA is just isn't similar enough. Remember, when you want to create to be fertile, to have fertility. Remember when we talked about meiosis, which was when we make our sex cells, which are our gametes, right? So whether they're egg or
yeah,
sperm. In order for that to happen, remember, there has to be that matchup of those homologous chromosomes. If I'm a donkey and I'm being bred with a horse, we're not going to have a good matchup because we have different chromosomes. We are different species, right? So if you don't have that matchup, you're not going to be able to create viable sex cells. You're not going to be able to create sex cells which can then actually work and make other individuals. So it really just comes back to genetics, which is why we always do this at the end. Does that hopefully make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome sauce. Okay, a population is a group of organisms of one species that interbreed and live together within a defined area. So, the pigeons of Michigan, are they in the same population as the pigeons of Brazil?
No,
No. Why?
because they're Brazilian.
Right. They're not interacting. Like they're still pigeons. They're still the same species, but they're not part of the same population because they don't interact and they don't interbreed. Okay? So, examples of population: a herd of sheep, maybe the sheep in Montana. I'm guessing Montana has sheep. That would be a population. A flock of geese, maybe a flock of geese that always flies from Michigan down to Florida and back. That is a completely different set of geese than ones that go from England to North Africa and then back in the summertime. Like those are two different populations of geese. A colony of ants. Maybe there is an ant hill somewhere in your backyard. That is one population of ants. The ants in my backyard, that's a totally different population because I don't think that the ants are going to be traveling from Oak Park or Detroit all the way over to the East Side center line where I live. So again, populations, again, is a group of the same species, but they have to be in the same area that is fairly well defined, and they are going to live and interbreed with each other. We'll get more into that eventually. All right, next slide. Wow, I think this is gonna probably be it. I didn't realize what time it was. Communities are groups of populations that are comprised of many species that live together in a defined area. So look outside your window, right? Maybe you have a tree in your backyard, or maybe like out on the street if you live in an apartment complex. There might be a tree there. And in that tree, I'm guessing there's some birds, but I'm guessing there's also some bugs that live in the tree. And I'm guessing there's some worms down in the roots of the tree. All right. That would be maybe a community. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm hearing the bell go off here. So let me stop my